Hey guys!
Recently, I made this frog character for a production that I'm working on with my team, and in this video I'm going to be showing you every step I took to make him, starting from a default cube. And later in the video as well, I'll briefly go over how I went about making my rig for this frog. You can also download the kind of clay version of this file for free in the description, if you guys need some sort of guide while you're following this tutorial.
Before we get started though guys, a few things to keep in mind.
Number 1, you might see some leaves and flowers and stuff in the background in this video. Just ignore that please. I want to keep this video entirely focused on the frog character and umbrella.
Number 2, I want to make it very clear that you don't need any drawing tablet or something like that in order to make this. I made this while just using an old mouse and keyboard, so no excuses.
And number 3, before you guys get started, I recommend downloading the free Stylized Asset Suite add-on. You can get it here. You can just download the free version because it's enough to follow along with the video like this. This will greatly save us time on texturing, and I mean this video would be like twice as long without it, so I just recommend using it to follow along in the texturing parts.
Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it.
First thing let's do is hit A on your keyboard and then hit X to delete all the objects. The next thing I want to do is hit Shift A and add a cube, and I'm going to hit Control 1 to subdivide this cube. I'm going to select the top face and hit E to extrude upwards, and hit GY to move it forward a bit, and then RX to kind of rotate it a bit as well, and just GZ to move it down a bit. We basically want to make a sort of bean shape, which is going to give the leaned over nature of the shape of the frog. I'll hit Shift right click to put my 3D cursor just somewhere at the bottom, and I'm going to hit Shift A to add a plane, and I'll hit G Shift Z to move it closer a bit. And what I want to do is tab into edit mode, select all vertices, and hit M at center, which will merge all vertices into a single one at the center. Now in object mode, I want to add a skin modifier to this object, and I'm going to hit Control 1 to add a subdivision modifier as well. Take your time, I know that might have been a lot to do really quickly, so yeah. You guys also may notice I have proportional editing enabled up here. You don't have to do that, but I just prefer to work with it on, so it's just personal preference. Now what you can do is take this single vertex that we have and kind of move it into place at the bottom of the frog body. Now hit E to extrude, and then E again to extrude back, and then E one more time. Basically what this does is it basically creates the leg of our frog really easily, just like that. Now what I'm going to do is add a mirror modifier to this object in object mode. And let's move the mirror modifier to the top of the stack and select our frog body as the mirror object so that it reflects over that. Now I'm going to click this vertex at the bottom of our leg and then shift click the new vertex and right click and hit subdivide on my keyboard. Then I'll select this new vertex and hit GG to slide it up, and what this does is it will kind of sharpen that area, so now we can have a more proper looking knee for our frog. And you can make any other small adjustments that you need to. I'll select everything in GX to spread it out a bit, and once again just make some small changes to see if everything's looking correct and to get it looking more proper. Of course it's a good idea to look at pictures of frog legs so that you can get an idea. Now what I'm going to do is add another plane, and I'll select everything M at center once more. We're going to add a skin modifier to this object as well. Hit Control 1 to subdivide, and then add a mirror modifier and select the body. So now we have this reflecting over the body as well. In edit mode I want to select that vertex and hit E to extrude, and you just want to basically make this into the arms. If you want, you could do like an A pose or a T pose, but I just wanted to have the arms of the frog out in front of it, because at first this was a bit more experimental and I wasn't planning to rig this version, but even though eventually I did, as you'll see later. Now I'm going to select these two vertices for the arm we have here and right click subdivide, and I'll select that one in the center so that I can bring it down a bit and give a bend to the arm. And you just want to make sure that the arm is properly going into the body. I'm going to select these two vertices we have kind of like for the hand here so far and just move it in a bit as well. Now I'm going to hit Shift A and I'm going to add a cylinder. You can decrease the vertex count just a little bit, and I'll rotate this, move it into place, and I'm going to select the top face and hit Alt S, which is going to basically slide it out along its normal and pretty much just extend the size. We can then hit S Shift ZZ to scale this object in the local X and Y axes but not the Z axis. So now what I'm going to do is hit Control A on the subdivision modifier to apply it, and just like that we now have more smoothness and more geometry to our body. And honestly, I didn't think that was enough, so I hit Control 1 one more time and then hit Control A on the subdivision modifier to apply it again, and now you can see we have even more geometry, and this is way better. Now I want to make a cavity for the eye, so what I'm going to do is select a couple vertices at the top of the body and hit Alt S, which will basically make it cave in just a little bit. And I'm going to select some of the vertices above that, and I just want to pull them up with GZ so that we can now kind of have like a lump above the eye, which is pretty characteristic in frogs. I'll then hit Control 1 to subdivide this once again, and still with the subdivision modifier, I'll slightly nudge another vertex at the top of the eye area and just make some other small adjustments, like deepening the eye cavity with Alt S. What you can also do is go into sculpt mode and then hit G on your keyboard to use the grab brush. And I'm going to enable mirroring by clicking this button in the top right here. So now what I can do is start massaging out that area a bit to make the lump around the eye even bigger and also to have a crevice in between it. This is just a common feature in frogs, so that's why I want to make it. So once you have a shape that you're satisfied with, I'm going to hit Shift A and add a UV sphere, scale it down a bit and then hit RX90 to rotate it, and then rotate it a bit more and scale it down. Basically this is just going to be the eye, and you want it to be pointing out, so that's what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm then going to add a mirror modifier and reflect it over the body of our frog. I'm then going to apply the subdivision modifier once again, which will give us even more geometry to work with. You can always go back into sculpt mode whenever you want if you want to be able to make changes in a more artist-friendly way. It doesn't matter whether you use edit mode or sculpt mode. For the sake of what we're making here, it's kind of the same thing, but you could just think of sculpt mode as a more artist-friendly version of edit mode because you can move things around easier. So I'm just using my grab brush, nudging things a little, and I want to pull out the front of the face by just clicking and dragging, and this is going to make it look a lot more realistic and frog-like. I'm also going to put a dent roughly a third of the way down the back and then have the rest of it be puffed out a bit more because that's another common characteristic in these types of animals. I'll then go back into edit mode and using Alt S and also by hitting G to move things around, I'm going to basically move all of these vertices around the eye area so that it kind of encapsulates it just a bit. This doesn't have to be perfect. You'll see that mine in the end is not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to get the job done. We just want to make sure that the eye is like inside of an actual cavity and not just kind of like floating there. So you can see that's what I'm trying to make on both the right and left sides of the head. One other thing you can do is hit V to switch to your draw brush and draw on the top of the eye to puff it out a bit. Here I also hit Shift C to switch to my crease brush and I drew around these bumps of the eye just a little bit. Alright, so the blocking is pretty much done. Let's switch to rendered view by clicking the icon up here, and I'm going to hit N to open the N panel and go down to the Stylized Asset Suite tab, hit New, and you'll see we can get a base color immediately for the object we have selected. And to start out with, I want the body to be a kind of beige white type of color, so I'll set it to that. Now I'll select the arms and do the same exact thing by hitting New, and I'm going to set it to a green type of color this time. For now I want the legs to have the same color and shading, so I'll select the legs, shift select the arms, and then hit Ctrl L link materials. Now I'll select the stand for the umbrella, and I'll do the same thing except this time set it to a red color. Just gonna nudge the stand for the umbrella a little bit better into our frog's hands. I'll select the eyes and add a new material to them as well, and this time switch it to a white color of course. We're going to want the texture paint on the eye, so I'm going to add a texture paint / draw all colors effect, and you can click the create new texture button. I'll keep the resolution at 1024 by 1024, and you guys want to make sure you set the alpha to 0, so be absolutely sure that you do that because it's necessary for the texture paint / draw all colors effect. Now before we start texture painting, we need to UV unwrap this sphere. Super easy. What we'll do is go into edit mode on it, hit Alt Z so you can see through it, and I'm just going to alt click a ring going around the sphere, hit Ctrl E mark seam, select all the faces and then hit U unwrap. And now you can see if we draw with black for example, we can easily just draw in whatever color we want. If it's not working, you want to make sure you have your eye image texture selected up here, because this is where you select the image texture that you want to work on. Additionally, if it doesn't work, you can try selecting all faces and hit Shift N to recalculate normals, which is just something that might fix the issue if you guys have an issue.
Are you interested in learning to make high quality stylized art in Blender, but are maybe struggling on having a clear path to learning it? If so, check out my stylized art masterclass on ukiyo.io. This is my comprehensive stylized art in 3D class and community, where you'll not only learn how to make things like stylized environments, scenes, characters, but also my actual process for how I pick my values, colors, designs, and use observational and design strategies while making 3D art, as this is what actually drives the quality of your work, not just like the button pressing that we're doing in this video in Blender. I'll show you how to sculpt, model, and rig this character so it's ready for animation completely from scratch, as well as how to give it dynamic lighting and all of that great stuff. Even if you're a beginner who only knows the very basics of Blender, this will completely transform you from a beginner to someone who has a serious understanding and skill, not just in Blender, but in concepting and design in general. But that's just one of the many things that you'll receive upon joining. You'll also receive access to my full series going over how I made this stylized environment from scratch, including how I made this stylized dog model, and all of the other things you see in the scene. You'll also get access to my ukiyo character model and portrait series where I show you step by step how to make this character, as well as 2 full courses going in depth on how I made these koi pond and sunflower scenes. And by the way, you get lifetime access to all of this stuff as well as updates. Not only that, but you'll gain access to my observational series as well, where I talk about my methods called the layered method and custom concepting, which is what I actually think about while making my scenes, because the process of choosing colors and values is infinitely more important than, you know, the button pressing we do in Blender.
Alright, back to the legs. I'm just going to move around the points a bit. Keep in mind this isn't a linear process, so you'll be jumping around a lot from body part to body part as you make this. And now back to the body, I want to finish encircling the eye, especially at the top. You want to make sure the top is kind of like a cliff over the eye. The bottom doesn't matter as much, but yeah, you just want to make sure the eye sets realistically into the cavity. Again, I'm going to switch back to sculpt mode and make some more small changes wherever I see fit. And at this point, I'm being a little bit OCD. What we have is probably good enough, but I just wanted to make sure I really nailed down the shape of the frog. One thing you guys may notice is in edit mode, I was mostly working on the right side of the frog. So what I'm going to do is in edit mode, hit F3, type in symmetrize, and then set the symmetry from +X to -X. It might be -X to +X for you guys, but I just wanted to reflect the right side to the left side. Okay, moving on, I'm going to hit Control R, click and then right click again to add some loop cuts going down the center of the frog. And these new loop cuts will add more geometry to that area so that we can get it a bit more precise. The top of frogs' heads tend to have this more refined looking shape to them, and I felt like in order to display that, I needed more geometry to work with. I forgot to call this out, but I did add another subdivision modifier to this model just to smooth it out a bit more. Anyways, you can see here, using my grab brush, I'm trying to make that shape that the top of frogs' heads usually have. One more change to the top of the eye, you can hit Shift C and hold Control while drawing with your crease brush to inverse crease the top of the eye area. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that though and draw with a lighter strength this time though, because the first time I tried it was just like too harsh. I wanted to bulge the eyes out a bit more, so I selected the top vertex and hit Alt S with proportional editing enabled. Although to be honest, I'll undo this later after rigging because it looked weird in motion. I'm now going to add an object outline effect to the body, and you can increase the thickness a bit to your liking as well. Pretty soon I'm going to want to texture paint on the body, so we need to unwrap this model too. So what I'll do is select a loop going around the top with Alt click, and then hit Control E, mark seam, so just like that. And I'll alt click to make a loop, just kind of like going across the whole body. And then I want to deselect with Control Shift right click the edges we have selected at the top of the frog, because having more seams there would just be a bit unnecessary. By the way guys, you might notice the symmetrize messed up a few vertices at the top here. The reason I didn't fix that is because it didn't really mess anything up, so it wasn't essential. But if it bothers you, you could just select those vertices and merge them together to fix it. It doesn't really matter though. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. I'll hit Control E, mark seam again, select everything, U unwrap, and you can see now our frog is properly UV unwrapped. I want to make a slot for the mouth to go, so I'm going to select some edges around where our mouth would be, and then hit V to rip those edges, and just pull down just a little bit, which you can see now, especially if I go into solid view, it's very easy to see what that did, which is rip the edges down a bit. I'm now going to add a draw slash paint with a single color effect, because usually I prefer to use draw slash paint with a single color instead of all colors, because this lets us keep things a bit more procedural and easily changeable later. Now keep in mind when you use any effect, besides for the texture paint slash draw all colors effect, you always want to just draw with white in the first slot and black in the second slot here. And now to make things a little bit easier to visualize, I want to turn on wireframe in our viewport display for this object, so that now when we texture paint, we can actually see the geometry of our model as well, which is kind of useful. I'm trying to draw an outline around the mouth, but a faster way to do this would be to go into edit mode, and you can see it's hard to see, so what I'm actually going to do is just disable the subdivision and solidify modifiers, so that now we can see the faces way more clearly and easily. And I'm just going to select the faces around the mouth, just like this. You can then re-enable the modifiers if you want, and go to texture paint mode. Click this button at the top, which is going to basically allow us to draw only in the faces that we have selected currently. And this will just make it way easier to draw around the mouth without accidentally drawing on the back of the body with black as well, which we wouldn't want. I also thought my mouth was too open just a little bit, so I'm going to select the edges on the bottom of the mouth and just try and move them up a bit with GZ. I felt like it looked like the frog was frowning, to be honest, so I took my grab brush in sculpt mode and moved the geometry a bit so that would go up a bit more and not look as sad. So you can see at this point I'm switching between texture paint mode, sculpt mode, edit mode to basically just refine things as I go. It's never a linear process, and I want you guys to internalize that. It's not like you just do one thing and then the next thing. You kind of have to jump around a bit and do what's needed. I'm going to add yet another draw slash paint with a single color effect. This time we're going to make it green, and I just want to kind of fill wherever I want it to be green on the body, which is going to be at the top of the frog and just on the back as well, but you'll see I didn't really completely fill the back with green yet because I wasn't sure how much I wanted there, so that's something we'll do later. Now I want to draw an outline around the eye, but you can see when I draw with our blacks image texture, nothing's coming up, and that's because our black texture paint effect is before the green one, so I'm just going to swap the effects so that the black one comes after, and now you can see we're drawing on the green instead of behind it. And now I'm just going to draw a nice outline around the eye. I'll go back to sculpt mode and move the mouth down a little bit more. This time I want it to be almost like the mouth is slightly slightly smiling. Just really don't want it to look depressing or anything like that. That was my main goal. I'll go back to the eyes and just fill it with black a bit more so it's more straight. The eyes will be crooked for a while, but I'll show you guys how I fix that later. I'm also going to draw with red, and I want the black of the eye to be surrounded by that red. So you can see, once again, I'm being extremely rough in this phase of the piece of art that we're making. We can go in and refine things later, but for now I just have it going from black to red to white on the outside, and that was my goal for here. Back into sculpt mode on the body, if you hit V to switch to your draw brush, you can draw and puff out the belly of our frog just a bit if you want to have more of like a plump type of belly for your frog, but that's totally up to you and whatever type of character you're trying to represent. If you want, you can also add an ambient occlusion effect to your frog's body, but I won't do much with this because I kind of don't like the way it looks that much, so it's up to you guys whether you want to add it or not. I'll set the strength really low for now. Now let's add some lighting. I'm going to add a stylized light dynamic effect. Make sure you have a sun in your scene, so hit Shift A and add a sun if you don't have one. I'm going to set tune steps to 1, so we just have one light and shadow value, and I'll play around with the light slider / controller until we start to get some lighting showing. Select your sun and hit R twice, RR, and then rotate it around until you get a lighting that you like. We can play around with the shadow values of our frog's body now very easily, and yeah, that's pretty nice. Now I want to add the top for the umbrella, so I'm going to hit Shift A and add a circle. We can move it up with GZ, go into edit mode, hit EZ to extrude upwards, and then S to scale in, and then hit F to fill the face in the center. Now we'll hit Control R, and then click to add a loop in the center, and hit Alt S to basically plume it out a bit. And now we have a nice shape for the top of our umbrella. So you can rotate that a bit, and we just want to of course put it on the top of the stand or holder or whatever you want to call it. We can link the materials as well so they both have the same material. And after that I'm just going to add a stylized light dynamic effect to them as well so they have shading on them. You might have to right click and shade smooth if the shading looks too blocky. And yeah, you just want to move this into place until it starts to look like a proper proportion for what an umbrella would have. So I'll just nudge it into place and obviously make it bigger because it's going to be a big umbrella. Alright, now back to the body of our frog. Using our black image texture, I'm just going to draw in a mark for where the nose should be, and you can see that already makes it look a bit more realistic. I also wanted to saturate the white of the body a little bit more, so I did that as well. One of the awesome things about the texture paint / draw one color effect is you can so easily adjust the colors that you drew, which is why I prefer it over the all colors texture paint effect. I now want to draw some highlighted parts on our frog's body, so I'll add a hue saturation value effect, and once created you can increase the value by a lot. And now what we want to do is create a mask for this effect. You can call it whatever you want, and then click new. Make sure you enable the mask with the slider and also invert it, and you'll see now the value increase we did is gone. If we go to texture paint mode and draw in that new image texture we just created, we can basically draw in areas we want to be that highlighted version. So I just want to highlight the edge that's on the bottom of the mouth, because you can imagine that since there's an indent for the mouth here, the bottom part of it should be catching light. So that's why I'm drawing in this highlighted area here. And you can refine it as needed. And yeah, now let's add a stylized light dynamic effect to the eye. You'll probably have to remember to shade your eye smooth, so don't forget to do that. And of course you can adjust the light slider / controller and get it however you like. Generally it's not a good idea to have too much contrast on the eye, so you want to keep it low key with that. Next I'm going to hit Shift A, add a circle and fill it. And what this is going to be the highlight of the eye. So you can rotate it basically just above the eye, and then once you're done you can click new, and all we have to do here is just set it to a white color. We don't need any shading or anything like that at all. And you can hit Shift D to duplicate that and then move it on the other side of our frog as well. So now both eyes have a shine to them. Alright, next let's do more work on our arms. I'm just going to scale the ends a little bit down. I'll go to solid view, and what I want you guys to do is select the vertex we have for the start of the hand, and then click this mark loose button, and then we want to extrude 4 times. You can see 4 times here, 1 time for each finger, and this is basically going to give us like a palm of our hand for our frog. Next, select all those vertices and hit E to extrude upwards, and hit Control A to thin them out towards the end, and you can see we get things that look like fingers, which is really good because we can basically use this as the webbed hands of our frog. You'll notice with the skin modifier, the geometry will mess up and you have to play around with it a lot and sort of fight with certain areas where the geometry gets messed up, so that's just one thing you have to pay attention to. Just focus on getting it to look right on the right side because we'll just reflect it over later, so don't worry about that. Let me just scale these tips down for now. I'm just going to spread the fingers apart a bit, just so it's more similar to how an actual frog hand looks, because it does not really look human-like. Once again, I'm just moving around these vertices to try and get the geometry to be relatively decent. It does not have to be perfect, once again. You just want it to look relatively correct, because pretty soon we're going to apply the skin modifier, so that we can just adjust it in edit mode very easily. Before that though, let's select all the vertices for the fingers, right-click and hit subdivide, and select all these middle vertices and hit GG to just slide them up towards the ends of the fingers. Then select all the vertices at the end of the fingers and hit Control A, and this is going to give us the characteristic look of how frog hands are very like blobby at the end. You can also hit Control A on those other new vertices we just added to make them a bit thinner. Next, we're going to repeat the exact same process, but this time on the feet. So I'll hit E to extrude out. We can move that back a little bit so it's not so long. You can adjust the size, of course, up to your liking and what type of character you want to make. Now after that, let's click Mark Loose on this final vertex, and then extrude out 4 times, 1 time for each digit of the feet, or I don't think it's called digits, like, you get what I mean though, like for the toes. And then I'll select all 4 of those vertices, and you can move it around a bit to make sure there's no issues with the geometry, and after you're ready, just E to extrude, Control A, just like we did before, nothing different at all. And you're going to have to move things around here, of course, to try and get it to look more realistic. Of course, once again, we'll make more changes after applying the skin modifier pretty soon. But for now, just try and get a general shape that looks good. Even if your proportions are kind of messed up, it's okay, because that's something we can adjust later. You just want to have the shape correct here. That's the main thing. The overall shape should be correct. So you can see here, once again, I'm just making that blobby nature in like the ends of the toes that frogs usually have. I'm actually going to now take the entire bottom part of the legs and just move it down a bit, because in the case of me wanting to rig this character, it would be a lot easier to have the legs going down rather than bent completely. And of course, after this, you can make any other small changes you want to your skin modifier, arms and legs. Before we go any further, if you want to make a backup of your limbs, you can just select them, hit Shift D, X, then move it by like 15 units or something. Completely optional, you don't have to do that, but I just wanted to make a backup. Anyways, now you want to delete the mirror modifier on your limbs, and then hit Control A to apply both the skin modifier and the subdivision modifier. After that, we can re-add a mirror modifier to this new mesh that we have, and reflect it over the body, of course. And you can see now we have actual geometry for our arms and hands. The blobs at the end of the hand should be a little bit more spherical shaped, so you're going to see me here just try and make it look a bit more spherical, although it looks quite pointy here, so I'm going to use a subdivision modifier pretty soon to smooth that out. But anyways, now let's do the legs. Let's delete the mirror modifier and then apply the skin and subdivision. Re-add a mirror modifier and then reflect it over the body. Once again, I want the blobs at the end of the feet to be more round, so I'll bring it out a bit. And now we can add an outline to the arms if you guys want. So I'll just add that effect quickly. It's also a good idea to match the green on the body to the green on the arms, so I'm going to just copy over the green we used on the body with Control C, then Control V to paste it into the arms and legs. Now let's add an outline to the legs as well, so you can see now we're actually really getting somewhere with this. Let's also add a stylized light dynamic effect, and now we have shading on our arms and legs. Once again, I'm going to set tune steps to 1 and adjust the light slider / controller until I get a shading look that I like. Eventually, we're going to want to texture paint on the arms and legs, so what I'm going to do is mark seams on them now. So you can see me here, I'm just going to mark an edge, going kind of like from the back of the arm and then down beneath it, and then across the hand here. You generally want to have it in places that are generally less seen by the camera, so you can try to do that. I actually made a mistake with the unwrap here though, which I'm purposely going to leave in because later in this video, you guys are going to see me fix it, and it's important that you see what the process is for fixing issues like this. So for now, you can follow this unwrap that I did, but later I'm going to show you what the issue is and how you can fix it. I'm going to do the same exact thing with the legs here. We're going to mark some seams and unwrap it, just like we did with the hands. Next, I'm going to add an outline to the stand for the umbrella as well, or handle. You can see the outline is quite messed up and not working, so I'm going to hit Control A, apply all transforms, and then set the origin back to geometry, which should fix that issue. I'm also going to add an ambient occlusion effect to the material that we have for our umbrella, which is just going to allow us to have more detail on it. Since the top of the umbrella is a flat object, it's a good idea to add a solidify modifier to it so that it now has some thickness, and you can also hit Control 1 to subdivide if you want it to be smoother. So yeah, I'm just going to raise the height of the umbrella stand by trying to hit Alt S, although you guys might have issues at this point, so if that's the case, you can kind of just move it regularly with the G key. After that, I'm going to add a loop cut and just drag it to the top. Then I'll Alt select this loop that we have here, and I'm going to hit E and then Alt S, which is going to allow us to have this cylindrical form at the end of the stand for the umbrella, which I think makes it look a bit nicer. And yeah, I'm going to add another circle this time for a similar reason. I just want to have another one of these cylindrical forms at the end of the stand, so you'll see me adding that here. Sometimes when you try to link materials, everything might turn black. It's really easy to fix though. Just hit tab, go into edit mode, select everything, and then assign the material that you were trying to link. And after that, you can delete the outline that it copied over and just add a new one on your new object. But you can see that's not working, so I'll hit Control A to apply all transforms, which didn't work either. So let's try selecting everything, hitting Shift N, and now you can see that worked. Alright, now to add the spokes for the umbrella, I'm going to hit Shift A and add a curve Bezier circle. Let's hit slash on our keyboard to go into local view, and I'm going to hit Shift A to add a cube. And I'm going to add a curve modifier to that and select this Bezier circle that we made as the object. Let's then add an array modifier and position it before the curve modifier. So now you can see we can very easily wrap this cube around the Bezier circle. And if you hit tab to go back into edit mode, you can very easily adjust the shape of these cubes and just very procedurally mess around with the shape and all of that. So you can see what I'm doing here is just trying to get it so that these cubes, which are now rectangles, kind of spiral out from the center. So I'm just tabbing in and out of edit mode to make adjustments and then see what it looks like in object mode, because you only see the modifiers in object mode here and not edit mode. After you're done, you can hit slash to go out of local view. And what I'm going to do is select both of these and hit Alt D to duplicate this, while also linking the two objects together. So if I adjust one in edit mode, the other will get adjusted as well. And that's the point of using Alt D instead of Shift D. Shift D will just make a total copy, but an Alt D is like a linked copy of the object. You'll see very soon what I mean. But now if you go into edit mode on the original one that we had, and you move around the vertices on it, you can see it now affects the one that we have that's actually on our umbrella, because we use Alt D, which means both of the objects are linked, right? And now you can move your umbrella top as well so that it fits properly. And this is just going to be a very iterative process of trying to get it to fit pretty much, going in and out of edit mode to make adjustments and seeing if it works well or not. You can see here I shrunk the width by scaling the spokes in edit mode, which I think looked a lot better. Now I'll link the materials so it has the same material as the rest of our umbrella, and I'm also going to add an object outline, and already that's going to give us a lot more quality than we had before. Let's also just plume out the umbrella a little bit more with Alt S so the spokes are inside of it a bit more. Also, I think the umbrella, to be honest, is like a little bit too tall for what we're trying to make here, so I'm just going to select some of the vertices on the handle and bring them down. And I'll do the same thing with the umbrella top itself, just bringing it down a bit. Let's brighten up the color a bit as well, because I think it's a bit too dark. And at this point, you'll fall into a process of kind of making slight adjustments for a while until you get something that looks correct. For this next step, I decided to add a dynamic brushstrokes effect, which is only in the pro version, but for those of you guys who have the free version, you can also check out the stylized grunge effect, which also gives a lot of painterly contrast to your model. So you can use either one here. Sometimes I prefer to use stylized grunge, sometimes I prefer to use dynamic brushstrokes, but both are really good to be honest. Also, remember to save your image textures. You can see I lost the progress I did on the nose and on the brightness under the mouth, so I'll just redo that really quick off camera. You can also just put your spokes into a different collection and hide them so they're not taking up space. Anyways, if you guys want now, you can change the background color and just set it to something bright. You don't have to do this, but I just wanted to, so yeah, up to you. In the top face of this umbrella, I'm going to hit F3 and type in poke faces on it, which is just going to poke the faces so that we can then alt-click, basically going all around this umbrella so that we can kind of add, I don't know exactly what they're called, but these sort of forms that go around an umbrella and kind of like hold it into place. So I'll select those edges and hit Shift D, right-click, and then P by selection, so now it's its own object. I'm going to apply the subdivision modifier and then delete the solidify ones, and then convert this object to a curve after that, and we can finally increase the depth of the thickness of the curve, so that now it's an actual object with thickness. Of course, you can give a new material to this as well. You can just link it to the other material we already made for the umbrella, so I'll assign that material. And you can also add an outline to it, of course. If everything turns black, just go into edit mode, select everything, and then hit assign, and that should fix the issue. Also, if the outline is uneven, you can hit Ctrl A and apply all transforms, which will fix that issue. So I'll move around the position of this a bit so that it fits better and is more visible. And also what I'm going to do is take the vertices in between these cables and just bring it back a bit so that it gives a better look to our umbrella overall, because a lot of umbrellas have this type of shape to it, where it kind of oscillates up and down around its edge. So I'm just hitting GG to edge slide those vertices. If you guys want, you can add a gradient to your umbrella as well, going from left to right if you want to give it a nice stylized type of lighting gradient. So you can see here I added a local gradient. In the light version, you guys can use the rectangular one. That's why I added the rectangular one here, so that I can show you guys how to use that one. You can switch the style to linear and switch the color as well to whatever you want. You'll have to move it around a bit, and you might have to rotate your empty to get it working into place. So you'll see me just struggle with that a little bit here. But once you have it in place, you can switch the blend mode to whatever you want. Like I said, it's a screen here, and you can increase the value of the color if you want it to be brighter. So this is just something you guys can do if you want. It may also be a good idea to move the gradient so that it comes before the other effects that we added, so it doesn't interfere as much with the detail. So you can see that's a bit better. And so yeah, this is something that you can just easily adjust. To be honest though, personally, instead of using the local gradient rectangular, I generally prefer to just use the colored circular light effect. So you'll see me add that here and scale it up. You can see it's more of like a spherical type of gradient, and you can set it to whatever color you want, just like the rectangular gradient. But we have this occlude from dark areas feature here, which is one of my favorite things about it, because using this feature, you can actually clamp it so that it won't interfere with any of the previous detail on your model, and it's just a lot more good at not messing with your previous detail that you already added. So that's just why I prefer to use it personally, but both work. Anyways, I just played around a little bit more with my dynamic brushstrokes effect to get it to be a little nicer looking. It's kind of a back back and forth process, just going through your different effects and being able to easily adjust them. I think that's what's so great about this add-on for texturing things. So yeah, next I'm going to add a dynamic texture simple to this umbrella, because I want to add some stronger detail to it. If you go into the settings, I generally like to clamp it a lot and switch the blend mode to multiply. I also like to set steps to 1 so that the texture is only one shade, and set the color to be something dark because we're using a multiply blend mode. I have some more information going over this effect in this video, so you can check that out too. But if you want, you could also UV unwrap your umbrella by marking a seam going along the side and then just unwrapping it just like that. And with the dynamic texture symbol, you can actually switch it to UV coordinates, so now it'll just follow the UV coordinates rather than the empty that the effect adds in, which I don't want to get too ahead of myself here and talking about more complex things, but if you wanted to animate this, using UV coordinates would be way better. Please check out the beginning of my master stylized animated water video where I talk about coordinate differences, and that'll show you guys what I mean. Quickly here, I just decided to shift the color of the green on our frog just a bit to be a little bit more yellowish. Make sure to copy that change over to the arms and legs as well. And after that, I went back into texture paint mode on the body, and using your black's image texture, you can draw in some marks on the body to kind of indicate some like pencil scratches or like detail like that, which will just help it to look a little bit more high quality. So that's what I'm doing here. Now I'm going to separate the arms into a separate material from the legs now by clicking the make material / effects single user copy button. And now after this, I'm going to add a hue saturation value effect to it, darken it, and the point of this effect will be to draw in spots on the arms of our frog. So you'll see me setting the hue saturation value effect to a low value here, and then I'm going to go into texture paint mode on the image texture that I just created for it, and very easily with your brush you can kind of add some dotty areas to it if you want to get that type of look onto your frog. So I'll just go around rotating around the arm and seeing any areas that I want to add dots to. Now I'm going to go to the legs and do literally the exact same thing, adding a hue saturation value effect and drawing in my dots there. Pretty cool, nothing too crazy here I hope, just adding in some small details to our frog to get it to look better. I also went back to the belly because I wanted to draw in more pencil marks there. And even on the body of our frog, I'm going to add a hue saturation value effect again. Once again, with the purpose of adding dots to it. So just like we did on the arms and legs, I'm going to add in some dots here by texture painting on the image texture that I just created for the hue saturation value effect. They don't all have to be dots, by the way. You can make them a bit more irregular. Like you'll see on some places here, I make them a little bit more irregular shaped than just dots. So you can give it whatever look you want. This next part is optional, but I wanted to add a rim light to our frog, so I'm going to, on the body, add a stylized light per object effect. If you bring it into place, you can try testing it in different positions, but ultimately I found that on the left side it looked the nicest. I'm also going to make sure I set steps to 1, so that there's only one shade on this rim light, and I found that having the light on the left side in the scene just looked a bit better, and I'm just going to play around with some of the highlight settings here. Now on the arms, I'm going to do the same exact thing, adding a stylized 3D light per object effect. Once again, you have to be careful with rim lights because rim lights are kind of meant to be a thing that are more based on the camera angle that you're looking at, so you have to adjust them accordingly. You might notice the rim light becomes a little bit awkward in certain areas, so if that's the case, you can go down to the mask settings in the stylized light per object effect, create a new mask. So you can see here I'm just removing it from any areas I don't like. It's totally optional to do this though, and maybe looking back it might have actually looked a bit better to not have done this, so it's really just up to you and what you think looks good. Alright guys, so now I want to do a little bit of a sharpen filter and just like a little compositing. So what I'm going to do is open up the compositor tab and check this use nose button. Make sure you check that button. Now you can hit Shift A and you can add a glare node. These are really easy to use, by the way. Don't be like intimidated by nodes or anything like that, because we're just doing something really simple here. All you have to do is just play around with the settings pretty much to whatever you like. So you can see I'm testing here. And now what I want to do is add 2 filter nodes. So hit Shift A and type in filter. Just add 2 of them. And the second one I want to set to box sharpen. And pretty much it's very straightforward. You can just slide the factor on these nodes and it'll give a composite to your scene just to make things look a bit nicer. You don't have to do this, of course, but I just like to do it usually. I also like to set the soften usually to 0.45 or around that. And yeah. Okay, now back to the body of our frog. I wanted to make the outline we drew around the eye just a little bit bigger so that it's more apparent from a distance. So you'll see me doing that here with our black's image texture. I also wanted to make the nostrils that we drew just a little bit bigger, so I'm doing that here as well. I'm also going to switch over to our bright's image texture that we made with the hue saturation value effect so I can draw in some bright around it, which will just give it a more defined look. And then once again after that, I'm going to add yet another outline with black going around that, and now we have a much nicer looking nose. Now to the frog's body, I want to add yet another hue saturation value effect. The purpose of this was to be able to draw in some brightness around the eyes initially. That was my main goal, but later on you are actually going to see I'll also use this for drawing in some bright spots onto our frog's body, just like we have the dark spots. But for now, you can just see I'm outlining the eye. This is kind of an optional step, as it's something I more so wanted to test to see if doing this would make it look a bit better. So it's up to you whether or not you want to do this or not. And you can see here I'm adding in some spots just on the face using this image texture we just made. You can also draw in some darkness around these spots you make if you want to give them more of a 3D look, but that's up to you as well. Oftentimes on frogs like this, they'll have orange hands and feet, so what I wanted to do was add a draw slash paint with a single color effect to our arms, and of course later we're going to do the same exact thing with the legs, but I'm just going to set it to an orange type of color and create a new image texture. I want to make sure though that this effect comes before all of the other ones so that it gets affected by everything else properly, so I'm just going to bubble it up by swapping the effects until it's immediately after the base color. Now you can see when I try to draw the orange on the fingers, it's not working properly, and this is because the unwrap that I did for the hands wasn't good enough, so let's fix it. If you go into edit mode on your arm with all faces selected, you can see this is our unwrap, and just for more clarity, I'm going to hit slash to go into local view on this, so you can see here we're just focused on the arms. I'm going to select the hand using Control L so that when we go to the UV editing tab, all we see is the faces for the hand. So the issue with our unwrap we have for the hand here is you can see on the fingers it's just way too small. You can see I keep on zooming in and the top of our fingers is just like so tiny, which is a big issue. So in order to fix this, it's going to be really easy. Just select a ring around each finger with Alt click, and pretty much you just want to make sure we have enough seams marked around the fingers. So I'm adding a seam underneath the fingers and also at the top and bottom. So doing this will separate the finger into like a bunch of different islands, and by separating them into a bunch more different islands than we had before, it's going to make it so that there's no more stretching and we don't have that issue of having like really tiny faces at the top for some reason. So now when I select all of these faces, so just select all of them and hit U unwrap again, you can see now it's unwrapped it a lot better, and things aren't so like stretched or small at the top of the fingertips. So take this unwrap and just move it to the side for now, and then hit A on your keyboard to select all of the faces on your arm, and then take this new unwrap that we just made for the fingers, and you want to just scale them down and kind of like fit it inside of this package for the UV unwrap that we have here. If you want, you can hit Control L to select individual islands, move them around and scale them up a bit if you want to give them more resolution, but what we have now is like perfectly fine. And after this, when we try to texture paint orange, it's now going to work properly, and our unwrap is fixed, so we'll have to do the same thing for the feet as well. But for now, you can see me finally at last painting in some orange on our fingers here. So I'll be doing that. I'll be toggling in and out of local view with slash, obviously, because painting fingers like this has more crevices and small areas like that that are hard to get to. You will also see me knock back the strength of my brush because I wanted it to be a gradient where the top of the fingertips is more orange and then it becomes less orange as it goes away. So that's just something you can do as well if you want to have it more gradiented. I think that looks nice. Feel free to play around with the color and set it to whatever you want to. For now, I'm going to just disable this layer though, and we'll re-enable it later, if we decide we want to keep it. Now with the feet, on the top of the toes, I want to add some reflection to it, or some speculars, so I'm going to add a hue saturation value effect to kind of do that. But before we make an image texture for this, you guys might remember I said we have to fix the UV unwrap for our feet as well. So you're going to see me do that here. It's literally going to be the same thing we did with the hands by just selecting a ring and then pretty much just separating these toes into more islands so that it's not so stretched like it is before. I'll hit Control E, mark seam, and select all of these faces we want to re-unwrap. Unwrap them and then once again position them into our larger unwrap by scaling it down and moving it into place. Hope that wasn't too fast. If it was, you can always go back to when I fixed the hand unwrap where I went a little bit slower. But yeah, after that the unwrap will be totally fixed so you can create a new image texture. I called it like footworks here or something like that, and you can see here I'm just going to draw in a specular above the toes because frogs generally have a wetness above their feet. So I'm just going to draw in here that specularness on top of each toe, and I want it to become more faded as it moves away from each of these toes. Okay guys, over here really quickly, I just want to fix some of the wobbliness of the eye and how the colors are like really just doodled on and not completely correct. So I'm going to be a little bit more careful here with drawing my strokes in. So you just want to make sure that the eyes don't look so derpy like they did before. Just try and refine that. Now, a better way to do this, to be honest, although it's a little more advanced, is to just select and isolate the faces that you want to be whatever color you're currently drawing with, like I'm doing here. You're going to definitely have to make some adjustments to the geometry though. You might have to add loop cuts to certain areas, or you might have to like rotate your eye a bit, so keep that in mind. Really quickly here, I also want to add some orange just like we did with the hands, but now to the feet. So you're going to see me add a draw slash paint with a single color effect, and using this, we're going to be able to do the same exact thing that we did before. Once again, make sure you make it so that this draw slash paint with a single color effect is at the beginning of the effect stack. And after you're done doing that, of course, you can just draw in the redness. Hopefully it doesn't need much explanation at this point. Alright guys, so now I'm going to add a plane, and the purpose of this is to be able to make the scarf that we're going to put around the frog's neck. So this is a very simple thing to model. Pretty much all it's going to be is going into edit mode and then extruding all throughout the neck of the frog. We'll just go into local view to make it easier to see. And so all I'm doing really here is nothing groundbreaking, just extruding around the neck. And once I have a basic shape formed, I'm going to hit Ctrl 1 to subdivide it. And from there you can keep on extruding if you want to. We just want to make sure that it fully goes around and tucks in and all that. I'd also recommend adding a solidify modifier to give it some thickness, because after all we were just using a plane that had no thickness to it. You can move the solidify above the subdivision if you want, or you could have it after. It just depends on what look you guys like better. I just wanted to also make sure that the scarf was falling on both the right and left sides of the back of our frog, so you can see I've achieved that shape now. We can do the fringes on the ends of the scarf a little later. For now, let's just add a base color to it, and you can give it an outline as well. And I also want to now block out the hat that we're going to put on our frog. So I'm going to hit Shift A and add a circle. We can reduce the vertices a bit, but you can use whatever count you want. And let's just basically move this into place. And then we can go into edit mode and hit ES to scale in, and then EZZ to extrude on the local Z axis. You can bevel the top part with Control B to bevel that a bit, and you can see now we have a nice looking, very simple top hat that we can put on our frog's head. Although in the end, this is kind of going to be more like a straw hat. So when I add a new material to it right now, I'm going to set the base color to be more of a beige type of color. And once again, this hat has no thickness, so I'm going to add a solidify modifier to it so that it does have some thickness. And after doing that, we can then add an outline to it. Let's add some shading as well with a stylized light dynamic effect. And then you can easily customize whatever shadow or light settings you want. And yeah, let's maybe make the hat just a little bit bigger, but it's up to you. Now that we have our hat blocked out, I'll just rename it to hat and hide it because I don't want to focus on it right now. We'll come back to it later. And I'm going to go back to the scarf, and we're going to add a stylized light dynamic effect to that as well, so we can play around with the light slider slash controller, and once again tune steps set to 1. Also jumping around a bit here, I went back to our frog's body and I realized at this point that we forgot to fill in the rest of the green on the frog's back. So I used my greens texture that we made, and I just drew in on the back of our frog a bunch of green there, just like this, to fill that in. So remember to do that if you didn't yet. It's also a good idea to have a separation between the green and white of the body. So here I'm going to use my blacks image texture just to draw like a separation of it, which just I think honestly adds like a lot more quality to that area. You can kind of like seam it off so that it's not interfering with the green that's on the face though, and I think that just looks pretty nice. I was testing some different colors for our scarf, so you'll see for now I kind of had it as purple while I was making some adjustments to it. I just wanted to make the shape a bit better and scale the ends of it so that it's more thicker at the ends. I wanted to sharpen the top and bottom of the scarf, so I hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut and moved one on the top and one on the bottom, which just helps the subdivision modifier be a little bit more creased. And also if we try to unwrap this model, you'll see it's extremely narrow and not really a good unwrap. So what I'm going to do is just mark some seams in random places to split the model into different islands so that the unwrap will just be a little bit better. And once I'm done with that, I'm just going to hit U unwrap again. So now I want to add the fringes to the scarf. So what I'm going to do is actually add even more loop cuts going to the center. Now there's better ways to do this, to be honest, but for the sake of the scarf here, it's not really a big deal to just add a bunch of loop cuts going to the center, and then taking the edges of those and just hitting E to extrude and then scaling it a bit. So you'll see I'm just going to do that here, and you just have to basically make slight changes to these edges by scaling them and maybe adding more loop cuts in between them to sharpen them a bit. But this is going to allow you to just really easily add these fringes of the scarf. So that was the method I chose to do that. I then switched the scarf color to red because I thought that just matched with the scene a bit more, although both are good. So since we just added those fringes right now, I want to mark some more seams on our model and re-unwrap it. Thankfully we haven't texture painted anything yet, so it's not going to interfere with anything, but just mark some more seams, especially around the area of the fringes, to cut them off so that they'll be their own island and as a result have more resolution to them. And while we're on the topic of unwrapping, let's unwrap our hat as well, because pretty soon we're going to be texture painting on that as well. So I'll just mark a seam going on the the bottom of the hat, and then at the top as well, and then cutting through at the back. And from there, we've unwrapped our hat. I'm going to add a hue saturation value effect to it, so I can draw in some darkness. And the purpose of this was to basically draw in darkness in this area at the bottom of the hat, which should be just like totally dark because that's the interior of the hat. So I'm going to draw in a low value in that area. Next up, I'm going to add a texture paint / draw one color effect, and this is going to be our blacks image texture for this hat. And I'm going to just draw in some marks to kind of indicate that this is like a straw type of hat, and these detail marks are just going to give that vibe a lot better. So you can watch me here. You kind of want to have these oscillating marks where maybe it starts up small and then gets bigger, or vice versa. So yeah, I'm then going to add a loop cut down the center, then select those faces, hit Shift D, P by selection, and now we have this as a new object. I'm just going to give it a new material and set it to like a red color. So now we have a band for this hat, and make sure you fix the outlining on it and all that too. You can move around the vertices a bit to give it a bit of irregularity, which might look nice. You can do this on the hat too by just moving around some of the vertices, using GG to edge slide and adding loop cuts as needed. Another thing I want to do with the hat is just select some of the vertices, and with proportional editing enabled, I want to kind of curve it because straw hats like this are kind of irregular. They're not like top hats where it's just totally stiff. They have this irregularity to it, so that's why I did that. Okay, at this point we're just adding some more touches to our model. For example, I added some highlights on the knees. I'm also going to add some more dots in certain areas that I think they should be. More black marks as well. You're just kind of trying to optimize the quality at this point and seeing areas where you might have forgotten to draw stuff in. And yeah, so now our character is looking pretty good compared to before. You can also like expand out the belly a bit if you want here by using scaling. So that's just one other change that I did. One other thing regarding outlining and blacks is I drew in black on where the legs meet the body on both the right and left side, so that's something you can do as well. I also outlined a lot of the dots in the body with black, so that's something I went through and kind of did for like most of the dots on the body. You can see on the legs here I didn't have a black image texture for it, so I made one and just started drawing black on the dot. Same thing for the arms, drawing in black on the dots, and on the main body as well. I wanted to also repair the eye a little bit because the outline going around it was just a bit messed up, so I had to fix that. But this is what the process is like. You're just kind of hopping between different things at a certain point, trying to see how you can optimize the quality. Like you can see I jumped to the hat here and continued to draw pencil marks on it. One other interesting thing I did was on the hands, just like we did with the feet. I used a hue saturation value effect to draw in some brightness on the fingers so that they're a bit reflective, or reflective looking I should say, and have that wetness feel to them. So yeah, that was just another detail I added. Alright, so now some more finishing touches for the details. I actually added another draw/paint with a single color effect, and I set the blend mode to color and made it brown, so that basically I can just draw in areas where I want to kind of shift the color to be brown. Of course I did this because the dots, them being green wasn't like that cool, so I wanted to have some of them being brown instead of green. So you'll see throughout the body I kind of do that. And in addition to dots, I'm also making like these other random marks throughout the body just to give it a bit more detail and variety, because I just wanted to make sure that I was pushing it enough and not holding back in terms of the detail on the model. So yeah, at this point we're basically done with all that detailing. Okay guys, so now I want to talk about how I made a rig for this. First of all, install the Rigify add-on if you don't have it. It's free and it comes with Blender, so just make sure you have that extension. I'll walk you through my overall process, but unfortunately right now I don't have the time to go like super in-depth into rigging here, but hopefully this will suffice. I hit Shift A and added a human meta rig. From there you can basically move it down and scale it, and after you have it at the height of the frog pretty much, you can go into edit mode and start taking these bones and moving them around. You just want it to roughly follow the shape like I'm doing here. For the sake of our frog rig here, you can delete these face bones that come with the human meta rig, and also be sure to delete the face bone which is inside the head bone. And from there you're pretty much ready to just take this rig in edit mode and then position your bones all throughout the frog. So I'm going to position the arms here as well. It's quite straightforward. You just want the bones to align with the features of the frog character, and since it's kind of similar to a human because it has hands and feet and all those things, it shouldn't be too hard to do. You can also move the thumb away because we only have 4 fingers, that's why I did that. And it's just going to be a little bit time consuming placing all of these bones. By the way, for finger and arm bones, try to make sure that you flatten them. So you can see I'm hitting Control R here to make sure that the bones aren't like twisted at an angle, because after all, the forearm and the fingers, they kind of only bend on one axis, which is why you want them to be parallel with the hands. If you want, you can also turn on this axes feature here, which will allow you to easily see the axes of the bones. And this is mainly important for fingers and forearm. You just want to make sure that the axes are pointing in the same direction for each chain pretty much. So I'm doing that here. I realized here that our hand was intersecting with the body still, so I moved it out of it, and as a result of that I also had to go back and move the finger bones back into place. But once being done with that and having all of your bones placed, just hit Ctrl A, apply all transforms. And also one thing that's important is if you go to this spine.004 and spine.003 bone, make sure that they're connected like this in the way that you see on my screen. Otherwise when you generate your rig, you might get an issue, so just make sure it's like that. And once you're ready, just hit generate rig. You can see already we have a full rig set. So I'm just going to select the legs, body, and hands, and then parent it with automatic weights. You would see by default, we have an okay rig, but we're going to have to weight paint certain areas that are messed up. If you go into weight paint mode and you go to the vertex groups tab, you can easily scroll through the influence of each bone here, because after all, each bone gets assigned a vertex group when you parent with automatic weights. So for example here, for some reason, the index fingers had some influence on the mouth, so I was just getting rid of that. By the way guys, keep in mind, if you don't know what bone is causing issues to a certain area, if you go to the item tab up here in the end panel and click on a vertex, it'll show you all of the different bones that have influence on that vertex. So you could use this data to see what bones are causing issues in certain areas of your model. Okay, continuing with weight painting, you can see the arm here is just affecting way too much of the body. So I'm trying to remove the influence of the arm from the body. And you can see the shoulder too, for some reason it's just like absolutely everywhere. Same here with the leg, for some reason the thigh is like affecting so much of the body, so I just want to reduce that. And you can see we have something better now. Before we go any further though, I just want to add a simple rig for the hat. So I'll go into edit mode on my rig. We can create a new bone group and call it hat. Hit Shift A to add a new bone and move it to where the hat is, and just rotate it into place relatively. If you want to add jiggle physics and stuff, you might want to add bones for the bottom part of the hat as well, like this, but I think it's a little bit unnecessary for now, so this is good enough. Once you have your bone placed, you can just select your hat and the band, and then shift click the armature, Control Tab and select the hat bone, and then Control P, bone. I'm also going to parent the hat bone to one of these yellow head bones we have over here, so I'll just parent it with keep offset. Next, I quickly just want to rig the eye with a simple eye rig, so I'm going to hit Shift A to add another bone. And what we want to do is, you can rename it def-eye.l, which stands for left, and just position it around the eye. You can hit F3 symmetrize to symmetrize this bone to the right side of the head as well. And what you want to do is basically just position the bone so that the head of the bone is where the origin point of the eye is. Make sure you do that because it's very important. But once you're done doing that, let's just apply the mirror modifier on the eye and then separate it by loose parts, so now each eye is a separate object. And after that, what we can do is select the eye, shift select the armature, Control Tab, select the eye bone, and then Control P, bone. Make sure to do the same thing for the right eye as well. You'll notice when I rotate the eyes around, we have some areas that didn't get texture painted by white for some reason, so I'm just going to do that now and fix that up. Also remember to parent your eye reflections to the eye bone as well, so just do that. One other thing, our arm bone was affecting the scarf too much for some reason, so you can see here, I have all faces selected of the scarf, and I'm just removing all influence on all the vertices from all of these different arm bones here. I also did rig the mouth, but that's a little advanced for a video like this. For those of you who are in my masterclass though, of course we have the Shiba modeling and rigging video in the class where we model and rig the mouth and all that, so you can learn how to do it there as well. Now also, make sure you parent your eye bones to the head bone. The easiest way to do this is to hide all the bone layers besides for the def layer, which are the deformation bones that we were originally working with when we first made that meta rig. So just only have this layer visible and also the eye bones, and you can parent those two eye bones to the head bone at the top. I know this went a bit fast, but unfortunately I don't have much time to go deeper into rigging in a video like this, so hopefully it's good for now.
That's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you do happen to finish this tutorial, post your work, and if you post it on Instagram, you can do the hashtag crazyzawfrog and I'll repost it to my stories. So I hope to see your guys' work, and yeah, thanks for watching. If you really want to master this style, check out ukiyobros.io, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.